Hey, welcome everybody. On today's show, Jensen Huang, the CEO of Nvidia, recently discussed the concept of AI factories or token factories, and he's seeing it as like a new industrial revolution. But this time, we're talking with data and AI. So the question is, will companies create these specialized data centers or factories? We're going to talk about that today, alongside their physical product factories. Are we, collectively ready for industrialized intelligence production? Is it the next industrial revolution, but this time with AI, like I said before? It's an interesting idea, and Nvidia certainly has a lot to gain if it takes off based on where their products are in Blackwell and things like that. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about this concept of token factories, what companies are already starting to do this, what kind of use cases they have, and things like automotive and healthcare, and just generally dive into the discussion topic. Today is April 1st. April Fool's Day, but no fools here today. With me on the Daily AI Show, we have Beth, Jumi, Andy, and I'm Brian. And there's no April Fools on this one. Just a typical show. I actually forgot that until somebody mentioned it in the comments yesterday. But this is a real idea, token factories. I guess it could sound like something that's made up. That all these businesses are going to start creating these specialized data centers. But this is something I shared with you guys maybe a week or two ago, and I said, "Hey, I really think this is an interesting concept." What was your guys' initial take on it?
So honestly, I didn't get it. So I had a really interesting conversation with ChatGPT this morning, like, hey, tell me why this is a very interesting discussion. And by the end, totally transformed. Absolutely. Um, and part of why I didn't get it was I was thinking like, okay, so if you are like, if you're collecting data about your manufacturing process, like, how many shoe factories do you need to have that data, right?
Mhm.
And perplexity, sorry, ChatGPT, you're a new boyfriend, and I, am very, much about my perplexity, and, that's where I default in language. What it said was yes, like what a heel is or something like that in terms of a shoe factory is probably true across the board, but there's so much more data that you could collect in terms of the kinds of shoes that people purchase, how shoe materials function in weather. Right? There was just a real expansion of like, okay, it's not the process of the shoe, it's also the experience of the shoe, the longevity of the shoe, and I started to like, "Alright, talk to me a little bit more." So and that
Yeah.
came from, "Explain to me like I'm 5 why this is important."
No, I think it's a great starting point for this because I'm with you. It's like when you first think about it, you're like, so it's a data center, right? And you're like, it's a data center. That like all businesses to some level of success track their data. The ones that do it really well, we can assume have done a very good job with making sure the data is very clean, it's organized. We can probably assume that they have very little silos. We can assume that there are single sources of truth with their data. These are all like general tenets, I think, of a well-oiled operating business. I'm not saying business can't do better with it, but like the really good ones, usually I'm like, oh, their data's on point. Somebody's focusing on that full tilt, right? So like that was my first thing too, Beth, was like, oh, this is just a fancy word for a data center. But I think you kind of point out it's no, it's actually more than that. And maybe Andy or Jimmy, you can jump in on this because that's not it. That's a base level idea. It's really more about it being a specialized data center that full purpose is to produce these tokens. And tokens, for lack of better term, is the love language of AI, right? It's the language of how information gets communicated efficiently. And of course, that doesn't just have to be words. I went down a really deep dive that I'll talk to you guys about off camera after the show. Sorry to our group on this one, but this is an internal thing. But I went down a deep dive and really got into the multimodal side of data and what is possible now with that side of it. So we're certainly not just talking about ones and zeros now. Now we're talking about frames of video, and that being processed and contextual language and understanding of what Anthropic is built at, right? There's a lot there. So anyway, it's bigger than the idea of just ones and zeros being passed back and forth, which is where I started with this. So it's good to hear, Beth, that you were sort of where I was with this, which is like, that's interesting. Why is this interesting? Is this interesting? It's like, that's why I think it's a good conversation. Andy or Jimmy, jump in here.
Okay, let me say first that I think there's a little bit of there's a stretch that
Sorry, Andy, I'm gonna just interrupt you. Do you mind turning up your volume a little bit? I know we were
oh,
just talking about it before, but now it's really low.
can you hear me now?
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you, Andy.
Okay, great.
Go ahead.
So Jensen is taking some liberties with the idea of a factory, I think here, because yes, tokens are the fodder for the process in transformers that actually arrive at intelligence and representation of intelligence in AI, and tokenization is the, like, possible against any kind of stream that can be quantized into tokens. And so it's definitely related to multimodality. But what he's really saying, if eliminate all of the technicalities of it, is companies are going to be paying attention to their data as one of the processes that maybe they don't spend so much time on now compared to their manufacturing process. So they're going to have to make parallel investments in the capture and tokenization of data. I'm a little skeptical that the tokenization step, which is part of the translation of available data, whether it's text or audio or video or time series data, all of that, in order to be fed into and trained into a transformer model, has to be tokenized. So are you going to build your own tokenizer and your own embedding system inside the company in order to accomplish that? Maybe some companies at certain scales or with certain high level security requirements will. They'll have their own. But in general, the tokenization step is available through the cloud-based model inference processing steps, right? So you feed it data. I upload a file, it gets tokenized
Right.
when I feed it at the time of inference. And similarly, the models that are working towards the artificial general intelligence are feeding enormous amounts of multimodal data simultaneously into these high-end transformers in order to take advantage of the self-attention mechanism inside a transformer that once something's tokenized can understand that and embed it. There's a second step after tokenization. By the way, tokenization just breaks down any complex data into manageable units. That's the first step. But then embedding is what elevates these discrete tokens into vectors, and there's a kind of a deep dive that could be done around embedding and vectors and how that allows self-attention to associate a part of an image to a set of text elements in the training and organize these as representations in concept space, as I call it. I don't think that's a term that most AI people would use, but representations for me are these relationships or similarity calculations across vectors that allow the self-attention mechanism in a transformer to say, oh, this audio blip that I hear as a patch that I translated through the tokenization process from a continuous analog form into a patch, which I treated like an image, which I then processed through the transformer. Now they're all kind of in a common space, and I can say this audio clip is related to this text and this video,
Mm.
right? So that's what's happening, and I just wanted to excitedly tell you that just this morning, uh, I pulled this up. Breaking GPT-5 news. Why is this relevant? Because this process of being able to tokenize any form of input is what makes the eventual full multimodality, image, audio, text, and time series, all of those together work for artificial general intelligence. So here's the breaking news from Gary Marcus, a very, very skeptical guy. Now listen to the tone of what he says. To my amazement, I just came back from a trip to Europe only to find an invite to a private GPT-5 demo, and I tried it. This thing is lit, fully multimodal, and in hours of playing with it, I didn't see a single boneheaded error, not one hallucination. If this is not AGI, I don't know what is. My hat is off to Sam and the gang. Great to see all the neurosymbolic components too, which have clearly helped with interpretability, reliability, and alignment. I'll be retiring now that AGI has been achieved, admittedly, several years sooner than I expected.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay, wait. Was that published today?
in Substack, yes.
Okay, that may be an April Fool's
Ah, you're right.
because
Oh, it is April Fool's Day.
that is very not
Definitely, he puts April 1 at the bottom. You're right. Okay. Because he's a skeptic. Okay. I got fooled. I'm not a big April Fool's guy. I wasn't even thinking about it being April 1st. Okay. Well, sorry. I
listen,
on a tangent there.
Andy, it wasn't coming across to me until Beth said it. So there you go. I was like, yeah, sure. So good for jumping in there, Beth, and keeping us straight on that.
But you can see how setting aside the validity of
Right.
T5 demonstrations, you can see how tokenization is really essential, along with embedding, to the universality of the transformer architecture in arriving at understanding and intelligence around the full range of things that we process through our neural network. Because we think in vision plus audio all the time, right? We're right now, if you're looking at this on video, you're seeing me speak and you're also listening to the sound, and those things are simultaneously encoded for interpretation by your neural network. That's what tokenization has made possible with transformer architecture. Because
And I think
anything can be tokenized.
no, you're on the same page I'm on this, Andy, which is to say that if you were to just look at it as a simple, like, again, zeros and ones, data in, data out, that sounds like a database. But if you look at where RAG currently is and what the future of RAG is, and let's just take a few things. Like there's your traditional RAG, which is called BM25, and I forget why that's called, like base model 25. I'm not sure what that means. But like BM25. And then even inside of N8N, you have like hybrid analysis. Let's take Anthropic's uh context aware, right? Where there's basically cache being added to it. So which drives down costs, but also increases the quality of the information coming back. Today's RAG systems, for lack of a better term, these vectorized systems are much more complex than what they were. The idea that it goes into some I don't know, 1000 degree, vectorized space that's, cat and dog are together, but they're not because they, like all that stuff, right? That's part of it. To your point, that's the tokenization and then the embedding, where the real big deal I think here is, and Jimmy, I'd love to hear what you think here, but I think the big deal is if you're talking about token factories, what is almost assumed is that you are now using the forefront, and Jensen Huang would like you to use the Nvidia architecture to do this, right? And what they've set up. So no shock there. But my point to it is, you're talking about complex memory systems. You're talking about hybrid systems. You're talking about cache. You're talking about memory maybe in other places. There's just so much more to it that's now you layer in what you just said about the multimodal image, audio, video. When you start to like expand your brain, or at least for me, and I start thinking about an enterprise business and all of that now new data that was previously maybe considered to be like dark matter. We know it exists, but we can't see it. And we're not really sure what to do about it, but we think it's there. And I think businesses, enterprises, large as small, have a lot of dark matter data, for lack of a better visualization. And They know it exists, but until previously, there was no good way to extract it. There was no good way to contextualize or put concepts together to go video with audio, whatever. Because let's take how many times something has gone up on the screen on this show where we didn't say what was on the screen. If you're watching the show, it totally makes sense. That video, visual works with what Beth is maybe saying, but Beth never says what's on it. It's assumed. That's something that, look at every business and look at every, demo use case, look at every spreadsheet, look at everything. And if you have the ability now to build a token factory alongside your physical products, or if you're doing services or SaaS or whatever, and you can capture this dark matter that you've always known existed, but there was never a good way other than humans to say, oh, when I ask a question, it brings back not only that visual, because it knows that that visual is in relation to what Beth was explaining, and that's important too. And I think that's where I get really excited about this, whether it's through NVIDIA or not, whether it's big enterprise or a small enterprise, this idea of capturing more data, but doing it intelligently and crucially being able to retrieve it in a way that makes sense, because it doesn't do us really any good if it doesn't understand the context and the connectors, in this vector space with all these multimodal pieces. That has to be accomplished first. But once you get past that, and I kind of feel like we are, just on other research I've been doing, I think the world is your palm tree, right? It's like whatever you want to do. So it's really going to be, honest, is going to be on these companies to do this with their data and really figure this out. And I really think it's going to give them a huge competitive advantage.
Yeah, I got a couple of thoughts on this as a whole, but to answer your question, Brian, I agree. I think a big problem in data aggregation as a whole has been you had to identify what you were going to track. Now, LLMs can identify every point of data, and you just ask it what insights you want to draw from it, right? Because that was the biggest thing. Like, I mean, you've said time and time again, clean up your house before you start working with your data and stuff like that. But with the capabilities of LLMs, you can take advantage of that entire data set, even stuff that you didn't realize that you were able to collect and interpret. So yeah, you could definitely draw some incredible insights. I mean, even in um, industries you might not think there's data there, there's an immense amount of data there. Uh, just take any media platform now. With multimodal, you can draw an immense amount of insights from everything that's on there: videos, audio, text, all of those kinds of things. And like you said, that example of we're talking about a subject because it's on visual on the screen, but we don't describe what the visual is. That can be all extracted, and it just connects. We just have it connected, or the LLM makes all the connections when we store that information. So so if anyone's thinking about, "Oh, well, will this, apply to my industry? Will this apply to my company?" Yes, yes, it will, and it'll probably be applied in multiple ways that you're not even aware of. Now the second thing is, when I read this story and now and following up on his statements, um, my mind went to the economy of it, right? I think there was a statement in there about, how tokens are that based well, in my head, it's that base currency that, AIs work in, right? So, this token factory idea, this tokenization of everything idea means that everything is quantifiable, identifiable, and transferable. So, you could have AI factories, not just for your own stuff, but AI factories that are drawing upon from other sources. And this is where these, different agreements can be created and things like that. So I, for me, tokens became AI economy, and AI economy went to, oh, we have something that can accomplish this. It's called blockchain. So, the transference of those tokens to another source with validation as part of the process.
Yeah.
So when we first mentioned this idea that we're going to have this show last week, uh, I I dropped a little tidbit of when I heard about it, my mind went, okay, so what are we going to see in 10 years? What are we going to see in 20 years? And with manufacturing being powered by data and information, you could manufacture based on the tokens, right? There's an example in this Business Insider article that talk about, chemical or molecule breakdowns, protein folding, all of those kinds of things. Well, take that to that next step. We have 3D printers. We have gone beyond just printing plastic or metal. Even some early 3D printers printed in chocolate, and now they're doing food printers. So we're, I mean, this will be a larger discussion for the Sci-Fi AI show for sure, but you can see the direct pattern in turning basic information, tokenizing all of these data points that you can draw from multiple sources to then be used for a quote unquote real world application or a manufacturing application. I just think about if so the secret recipe from KFC or Coca-Cola, you could have that easily transport temporarily to another location for the manufacturing process, and then those tokens can be taken back or processed or removed or things like that. So I think this really is a merging of what we're looking at today and what it means to be an AI factory and building upon that until how it affects our real world or our manufacturing world. So I think right now, yes, it's the dual factory concept, but that can totally build into just the larger economy of these generated tokens for whatever the output's going to be.
I think you make a good point too about like the economy side of it, because where my brain was going, but I feel like you're kind of saying this too is, well, just because Chevrolet has a token factory, right? They've created their own internal token factory. That's not to say there won't be entire industries. I mean, Jensen Huang is predicting this will be a $1 trillion market globally. AI factories, token factories, right? So that's his prediction. He's a smart guy. We can decide whether we think that's right or wrong. But here's the thing: if you get good at how you process data, even if it's not specific to the company, you can have businesses that are token factories that are niche to certain industries, and you in fact sell your proprietary token factories, or to your point, Jimmy, there's a trusted transfer of data back and forth. Maybe it's a shared for a particular period of time where you go, yeah, sure, you like you're spinning up a data center, sure, I'll give you access to my data center, you get access for the next 6 hours and it'll cost you X. Okay, translate that to, sure, we'll give you access to our token factory and all the amazing things that it is capable of doing. And you're appending maybe your data. Now, maybe it's not that clean and simple, but I do think there's this idea of cottages, startup industries that are cottage businesses that will start up who will do what they already do, which is I worked with a company, I can't name them, but a former client of mine, they were a data company. And what they did was they had the best data and sold it on your ultra, ultra rich, your 0.1% of your 1%, right? These people. And then so because you sell to them differently, especially if you're trying to get money for your charities and things, you would go about that differently. You're probably gonna maybe want to know about the watch that's on my wrist and da 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 da, right? And so they had the data. That was their product, was the data, right? So like this exists obviously. And the other side of this too that I'm just curious about is this really goes into like business intelligence, which is the former company I worked for before Scaled was in the business intelligence field, and it was data analytics, and it was SQL, and it was going in and usually one, cleaning up data. We talked about that, but then two, building dashboards that made the visualizations possible to see this data. You would build executive dashboards, and what do they want to do? And then while I was there in 2017-ish to 2021, 2, whatever it was that I was there, and it was 3 to 5 years, we even just saw the idea of being able to drill down into live data. That was totally new. This is before we were all just saying machine learning. We weren't really saying AI. We certainly weren't talking about LLMs at that point. That wasn't something that was in the general business. Everybody wanted machine learning. But what they were blown away by is something we can now do pretty effectively inside of Claude or inside of ChatGPT, which is to drill down into the data, go deeper and deeper and deeper into it, and then zoom back out. And that was revolutionary because executives, I've said this before in the show, the running joke was you can build the best executive dashboard and the executive will walk in a room, Beth will walk in the room and Beth go, but what about this? And it would destroy all the data analysts who had tried so hard to appease Beth, but her brain went one way. And so obviously once you got to live data and drill down, they could just go, well, yeah, let's just pause really quick and drill down into that data. And it obviously made it much, much more efficient. So anyway, I say all that and those analogies, those stories, just to say, this is what I think we're coming to with like token factories. And I think there will be people who specialize and are very, very good at, maybe it's the retrieval side of it. Maybe that's what their consulting business does. They're like, hey, Best company, Andy's company, you guys have done a fantastic job of getting your metadata, storing it. Yeah, you're using the best vector sources out there. You guys don't miss anything. If you do a 30-second phone call, that transcript, that audio gets processed, that gets tokenized. But what if Beth isn't great in her industry, or her company isn't great at the retrieval? And she's like, it's there. It's in our, we pay for it to be in our vector storage. We know we've done a good job getting it in there, but we're still not seeing the insights we really think we can get. We're still have a bit of a dark matter problem. And then I come in as the consultant and I'm like, I'm a token consultant. I'm a token extracting consultant. AI token extracting consultant. They're like, oh, what do you do, Brian? Well, I help you make sense of your tokenized data. I have the ability to go in and clear up your mess and take all the stuff you threw in there in vector and get great actionable insights for you, Beth. And I don't know, I almost said Becca. She's a coworker of mine. Beth. Yeah. So there's a Becca in my life. It's my coworker. So that's why, to do that. So anyway, I just want to throw that out there. By the way, people in the comments really quick were saying, like, way back, I said the world's your palm tree. And they said, what happened to oysters? That comes from another YouTuber named Tim Tracker, and on that channel, they do a lot of stuff in Orlando, and that's close to me. And I've been watching them forever. That couple says the world is your palm tree, and it's kind of stuck. And I like it better than oysters. So the world is your palm tree. I'm passing it on. I'm taking it and I'm moving with it, but it's not mine. So I just wanted to give credit where credit is due. Token broker, Jude said. That's another great term too. What do you guys think?
So I want to just clarify that tokens don't have any meaning in them, right? The meaning is created through the use of a transformer model being fed tokens, and the model in effect creating embeddings, reorganizing the position of those tokens in an n-dimensional vector space. Okay, so if you're going to extract tokens, I guess you're saying what I'm trying to understand this idea of being a specialist in extraction of your tokens. Eh, the meaning is created through the training process. So a fine tuning using your proprietary data in an enterprise would create the vector space inside the model. So that, you referenced RAG before, which is an external database. Like RAG is an external database that has taken information, embedded it, and therefore it's in a vector space. And you can match that up to the already existing vector space that is inside a pre-trained model in order to bring in relevant data, right? So you bring in the embedded data, not the actual tokens necessarily, and you put that into the model to say, okay, here's some additional information that's related to this part of your pre-trained representations in your pre-trained model, and now you can use that as additional context. But the whole idea of thinking about tokens as something separate from data, that's where I think that this whole idea that Jensen's thrown out there is a bit of is a stretch, because you're not really so interested in tokens. You're interested in the data. Tokens are a representation of the data that makes them, even if it's a continuous feed like audio, it makes them discrete so that the transformer can process them as discrete things. And there are methods that you can use for video that basically take images or video that basically take that image, which is, a big blob of imagery, and breaks it down into little patches that are then the tokens that are used by the transformer to understand each of those elements of the image. So I don't think you'd ever have any interest in retrieving a token. A token's just a process that breaks down data, and then you wanna get something out of the model based on its understanding and intelligence that's yeah, it's gonna feed tokens back out, but you want it translated. So what I think Jensen is really hoping for is that instead of the current model where we have very large pre-trained systems out there and we send our data to them in the form of a text chat or an uploaded file, and it breaks them down into tokens and processes them into their representational space inside the pre-trained model, he's hoping that you're gonna build one of those for your own purposes in your own enterprise. And you're gonna have the whole pipeline. You're not gonna have just a token maker. That's just a simple and kind of rote step in the process of data processing of the future for the purposes of AI. So, like you, Beth, I have a hard time. I struggled with what does this really mean to say that businesses are going to be token factories? Well, businesses have data. Data is of interest to AI, and so there needs to be a way of getting that data into AI models, whether for the purposes of inference, like you use the pre-trained information to understand and digest what the meaning of this data is, or to actually create new models that can ultimately simulate and perhaps represent in embodied AI things that happen that have been observed in your business. So I think that I'm getting the idea that he's going for, but I haven't listened to his speech about it, but it really did hit the sort of the buzz waves out there. And so this whole idea of token factories, it's still fuzzy. It's a fuzzy logic in my mind because I'm not so interested in the tokenization process as I am in the embedding process and the multimodality of large transformers and their ability to figure out how all these embeddings relate to each other.
So so I'm gonna pop in here to share a little bit more about my conversation because as I said before, Andy and I were kind of on the same page. So I was like, okay, I teach musical improv and comedic improv. What are the tokens that are getting created in that? And basically, ChatGPT was saying that it creates emergent adaptive human behavior data, which is exactly what AI lacks. You've heard me say a million times, if you want to practice and strengthen your resilience muscles, get you in an improv class and on an improv stage where you will have much pressure and adaptability and learning to trust people and people having your back. So these are the things that are not part of the training data, right? So I think part of what's happening in this is the ability to generate or capture or create training data that is specialized, right? And it's we say all the time that Tesla is a capture factory, right? They're data capturing robots and they have more information we think than anybody else right now on what it is to be a car on a road driving, right? Or, and potentially interacting with a driver. Like, I think the person driving the Tesla is also, um, having data captured around them, about them, right? Like that kind of stuff. And I'm wondering, Andy, Because I've seen some stuff about this, that there are people who are not diabetic who are using the glucose monitors, right? The perpetual glucose monitors, and I know that you're into biohacking. Um, are we becoming our own data factories, being able to be captured in a way that can then make real meaning for us? Because that's the idea of a token, right? You capture data, it then gets vectorized, and then it gets returned, but that's only relevant when it creates meaning, when the return of the data is meaningful to people.
Right. And that could change with generative AI, that could change by the person, by the hour. I think that's, like, sort of the idea, right? It's like talking about data centers, which are more or less highly structured data versus tokens, which are unstructured, right? They're not like I think you hit the nail on the head, which is like, it's not when I was part of the previous company and we would put stuff together, we had like synthetic keys, and that were the great connectors between multiple different, let's say, for lack of a better term, for easy explanation, multiple Google spreadsheets. But one of them had the customer's name, one of them had the email, one of them had the SKU that they bought, but no one data set had all the information. So you would build these synthetic keys that would connect those. That said, John Smith bought this SKU at this price, and this is the email, despite the fact that that data was in 3 different places, but still structured. Emails go in this da 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 da. I think with tokens, I think you're saying this too, Andy, I guess, is like, okay, that's just one part of it, that it gets tokenized, it gets embedded, but it's really the power of the generative AI to extract the meaning, and that changes by the person, by the day, but it's also a great equalizer because what it should do is make it just as accessible to the executive at our hypothetical company, which in this case, if Beth is leading the company and Beth has questions, Beth should be able to ask just as detailed and helpful information through this process of extraction on the back end of the vector databases as anybody else in the company. And if somebody else in the company needs to understand it more from a data standpoint, a finance standpoint, or the top CEO executive standpoint, everybody should be able to use the power of generative AI to get exactly what they need back from it. And that's where I think you're right, Beth. That's where the structure comes back, but it's unstructured in the sense that it's not in nice, neat tables like we're sort of used to having in spreadsheets and things like that. At least that's how I see it on it. But and I think to your point, Andy, about the Colin Token Factory, maybe I don't know this, but maybe Jensen Huang is like it's for lack of not having a longer name, or it's in spite of, because I see your point. You're like, is it really like are we really focusing on the token? There's so much more to this, but maybe it's just an easy term for people.
And it is
But
true that it is true that every time you interact with an intelligence like an LLM, you're sending it tokens. That's its language, lingua franca, and it's spitting out tokens. It's putting out tokens that then have to be translated into a representation that we can read in the form of words, because the tokens that come out are only fragments of words sometimes, but they have to be reassembled in order to allow you to read them, or they have to be reassembled if it's an audio feed into something that's intelligible for you. So it is essentially true that any AI is really a token factory. It's taking in tokens and it's processing those and it's spitting back tokens, and then we have to have a user interface on both ends of that process.
But it's not. AI isn't a token factory for me. My sense of a token factory would be the creation of the data. And that's one of the challenges that people have said about AI the whole time, right? Is AI just remixing things, or is anything actually created? I'm curious, Junmi, we've talked a little bit about this before. Like, what are your thoughts here?
Well, since you've opened the door to the idea of data creation, this all really goes back to me as you had given an example of our people creating their own data, right? Uh, all data is made by people. or the natural world, if you want to go down to the base things, right? Everything, every word we say, every move we make. Oh wait, that's a song. Um, the but all our actions through life, even our day-to-day life, creates data. When we go to work, whether it be remotely or driving a car, we take our kids to the park, we go to school. All of these are data points, right? And so there's a larger discussion of, is the data owned by those who create it? But to back to what you were talking about, yes, we are data factories. If we're breaking down everything into the concept of information, every movement is information in one form or another. Every action, reaction, all that stuff is information. So it's a matter of aggregating that information and drawing particular insights from it. So I think this does beg us to discuss the larger concept of data as we find it more and more valuable and how it'll affect us in, as the days go on. And the fact that this call for AI factories or token factories, um, decisions are made on data and things like that. So we kind of have to look at, well, what's the entire flow going to be from A to Z, from 0 to 1? What is that entire flow process of data? And, identifying where it's going to be interacted with, or, controlled, or manipulated, and those kinds of things. And are we seeing a new commodity? And that goes back to what I was thinking about the AI economy of the tokens and or tokens, uh, and along those sorts. So yes, I think that is a larger discussion on how we're generating and handling data from this point.
Before we sort of like get to wrap it up here, I did want to just call out, this is from Perplexity, but sometimes it just helps to think of like use cases as we're talking about this idea. So this is off like what industries are most likely to benefit from AI factories or token factories. So this is what it came back from. It said manufacturing stands as a primary beneficiary of AI factories, transforming this sector by enhancing efficiency and productivity through automation, which is something we really haven't talked about, but like we're talking about extracting the data in generative AI. Obviously, the other side of that is token factories that produce the training data necessary to have robots come in and do the work and understand the data, right? So there's that side of it. Enabling predictive maintenance, which would be huge. That could reduce downtimes, it's saying between 30 and 50%. I haven't validated all these citations, so just know that I'm reading this off what Perplexity says. Optimizing production. Then we have healthcare, just as a few here. Improved diagnostic accuracy and personalized treatment plans, which would be amazing. My wife's a dietitian. We talk about this all the time, and how AI is going to impact specifically dietetics and nutrition in my household. So I know this is a big deal. Analyzing vast amounts of medical data to identify patterns and predict outcomes. I mean, this is just my opinion on this, not the show's, but I think, the cure. I think of Dennis Leary, 30 years ago when he had a special called No Cure for Cancer. And I always think, well, the cure for cancer is going to be highly personalized and highly specialized cocktails of God knows what, which is sort of where it's going now. And AI is going to enable that. And so people are going to have unique solutions that would not be nearly as effective for any other person, perhaps on Earth. That's my opinion on that. That's where I think that's going. And I think this is a big part of it. It talks about automotive, employing cobots for tasks like welding, gluing, and surface fishing. I haven't heard the term cobots before. Have you guys heard that? Employing cobots? Not robots, but cobots.
That's a term of a cooperative relationship with the robot.
Okay.
So they would work in tandem with you.
Got you. Okay. Optimizing production processes, electronics. I don't want to, read everything here. Automated assembly, material transport, aerospace, accelerated design processes such as Airbus's reduction to aerodynamics prediction time, improved predictive maintenance. We've talked about that using digital twins. Ta-da! That's where Nvidia wants you to be. Use their digital twin systems. Retail and e-commerce, So analyzing customer behavior and preferences for personalized recommendations. We definitely talked about that on the show. Optimizing inventory management, demand forecasting, enhancing overall shopping experience. And then the last one it says here is finance and banking. So all sorts of different like ideas of where this could make a really big impact. And I guess just as sort of we round this up or wrap this up rather, um, it's really going to be the people who think probably outside the box, who are already thinking today or are already doing the best with the technology we have to tokenize, to embed, who are already thinking multimedia, who are already saying, I don't know maybe how I would use these presentations that I have sitting on this hard drive, but we might want to know what's on there because we've done all of that work to optimize whatever the next sales pitch or whatever it is. So let's go ahead and get those meta tagged, metadata enriched, whatever we need to do. Let's figure out what the process are and let's get that in there. And then I think that like even if you don't even know exactly how you're going to ask questions against it to achieve real, you know, helpful results, like we just talked about all these different industries, step one is step one, which is start thinking about the data that you have that you want to get tokenized and embedded. Step two is how can I use whatever the latest technology and advances in Gen AI or ChatGPT 5 or whatever it might be to make better sense of that data? But you can't do anything unless you put it in there to begin with. The vector store isn't going to create itself yet. Maybe someday. So, step one is step one. And it always goes back to the data and figuring out how you're going to have a competitive advantage of that and how that could be the differentiator for your business. Any last thoughts before we wrap it up, guys?
Yeah. Andy also has one. So, Andy, I'll go to you second. I think that one of the things to keep in mind is to engage in this topic within the framework of what AI does not currently possess or isn't good at, right? And that comes back to the Jan LeCun, AI is dumber than your cat because it doesn't have a world view. So what we're now able to do is to contextualize through our experiences because those are the pieces that are missing in the data, have not been captured, and are relevant. Maybe our chemical response to what is happening is going to be measured from the thing that you can stick in your arm, right? Or your saliva or whatever. So those are like bio data that's going to come. The reality show like confessional interview, that's the like, hey, this is what I was thinking at the time kind of data. There are a bunch of like frameworks that we use in other places that can contextualize data for all experiences. They just haven't been a priority up till now. And I think that we're moving into a place where that is potentially now something that people are interested in, specifically people who are training AI models, right? That's the specialization. That's the piece that is unique in your data capture that makes it relevant and important. Andy.
Yeah, thanks. I think the summary in my mind is that there is a tremendous potential for transformers, specifically as an architecture, to comprehend really voluminous data that if it's fed that data. And so the idea of businesses being token factories is find the ways that you can stream the real-time data into a transformer via the tokenization process. And you're gonna gain insights, especially when AGI is achieved. That transformer is going to be able, or a gang of transformers with some specialization and a central sort of organizing transformer will be able to take that continuous feed, now made discrete and calculable by the tokenization process, and you're gonna get insights out of that that we can't imagine at the moment, because right now our ability to calculate and arrive at a conclusion or solution is narrowed necessarily in order for us to perform the calculations. That won't be true as AGI arrives.
Yeah. Well, listen, great conversation today. Hope you guys enjoyed it in the comments. Thanks for, as always, being so active in there and having side quests and side conversations, as well as being part of the show and responding back to what we're saying. We're always reading all of them. I'm literally looking at them on the side of the screen. So they're always there for us, and just keep putting them in there. Don't think that they just go out into the ether. I know you're talking with yourselves and your community, but we're seeing them as well and bringing them into the conversation wherever we can. So thank you to everybody there. If you want to join us, if you're listening to us at a different time during the day and not live, just so that we are live Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern. And that means you can come over to YouTube during that basically hour and join the live chat if you like. On YouTube is where we recommend it. It is in other places, but that's sort of where this group is and where we would recommend you coming over to. Don't forget, you can go to thedailyishow.com if you want to sign up for our newsletter. It goes out every Sunday. Yeah, a whole bunch of other good stuff. So tomorrow will be the news. So we'll talk about whatever's come out in the last 7 days or so. Thursday, we're going to be talking about a McKinsey report. So that should be really interesting. And then Friday, we'll have our our bi-weekly recap where we take a pause. We look back at all the topics, including this one. And we really dive a little bit deeper into any of the ones that we think are, deserve a little more time on the show. So that's it. Thanks everybody for hanging out today. Don't get fooled by April Fool's Day and, look for the saran wrap on the toilet, on the toilet and all the things. And otherwise have a great day. Yeah, it's a thing, Beth. Beth is looking at me like that doesn't exist. Hang around in a firehouse for a little bit on April Fool's Day. See what happens. That's it, guys. Have a great one. And we'll see you tomorrow.
Allah.